Have you ever felt that although everything seems calm, something deeper is brewing in your life? In this video, we'll explore how Buddhism teaches us that even in moments of silence and apparent inactivity, there exists an invisible plan that guides our path. We'll discover how the hidden forces of karma, emptiness, and no mind influence our existence, and how we can learn to trust this process to find peace and purpose. Join us on this journey into the invisible, where each step brings us closer to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe. The invisible plan. When life seems to stop, there are moments when everything seems paused. Nothing moves, nothing changes. You're there, waiting for something to happen, but everything remains the same. This sensation can be disconcerting, even desperate. But according to Buddhism, it's not a void. It's a sacred moment. In those instances when you feel there are no signs, something deeper may be operating, something you don't see, the invisible plan. Buddhism doesn't speak of a predetermined destiny, but of a constant flow of causes and conditions that form what we experience. What seems stagnant may just be the silence before a great transformation. It's like a seed underground. You see nothing on the surface, but inside everything is happening. When it's said that there's nothing to do, it's actually an invitation to observe. What are you avoiding seeing? What are you resisting? The invisible plan acts right there, in what you don't control, in what makes you uncomfortable, and often in what you ignore. This plan isn't linear or evident. It doesn't manifest with clarity, but it's always present. It moves through what you choose, what you reject, your most subtle thoughts and your most intense emotions. And most importantly, it doesn't need you to understand it for it to work. It only needs you to trust, to not cling to the idea of control. Buddhism proposes that when life seems to have stopped, it's the perfect moment to look inward, to sit with yourself, with your breath, with your mind, and allow understanding to arise on its own. Not from logic, but from direct experience. Because sometimes only when everything seems still can you truly hear. This invisible plan in the background is life itself. It's not about something magical or mysterious. It's more a way of observing how everything connects. How a decision made years ago, a word you said without thinking, an intention you barely perceived, may be bearing fruit now without you knowing it. It's difficult to surrender to that kind of understanding because it implies giving up knowing, and the ego feeds on knowing, controlling, anticipating. But when you allow yourself to let go of those desires to understand everything, a different peace emerges. Not the peace of one who has all the answers, but of one who accepts living with questions. So if today you feel that nothing is moving, that nothing makes sense, remember this. The invisible plan may be in full action, and your only task for now is to trust. Because even if you don't see it, even if you don't understand it, something is always germinating within you. If you feel a quiet pull towards something deeper and want to keep exploring the hidden truths of life through a Buddhist lens, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a step on this path of inner discovery. Invisible worlds and hidden forces, what we don't see but affects us. The life we think we live is built on a very limited vision of reality. We use our senses as filters, and what we can't see, touch, or understand, we simply discard. But Buddhism, with over 2,500 years of exploring the mind and existence, insists there's much more beyond the visible, and not just beyond, but also within. When we speak of invisible worlds, we don't necessarily refer to mystical dimensions populated by strange beings. We speak of the spaces that exist within each experience, the levels of consciousness we don't perceive clearly, but that directly influence how we think, feel, and act. The Buddha spoke of 6 realms of existence: gods, demigods, humans, animals, hungry spirits, and hell beings. Though traditionally interpreted as real states after death, many modern Buddhist schools understand them as mental states we all transit daily. For example, the realm of gods is when everything seems to go well and we feel euphoria and fullness. The realm of hungry spirits is when no achievement or experience is enough. And the realm of hell is when we're trapped in pain, hatred, or despair. These realities aren't visible, but they completely determine our way of acting in the world. They're hidden forces that operate in the depths of the mind, and when we don't recognize them, they drag us along. One day you find yourself reacting impulsively, saying things you don't understand why you said, or making decisions that contradict your values. That's not coincidence. It's the result of those invisible forces that govern our emotional and cognitive responses. Another central concept is that of karmic tendencies. According to Buddhism, our past actions don't disappear, but leave traces in consciousness. Those traces are seeds that can germinate at any moment, activated by specific conditions. This is another layer of the invisible. We don't see how an internal tendency forms, but suddenly we're dominated by an irrational fear, an intense attachment, a need for approval. All of this has roots we can't always trace. Meditation is one of the key tools Buddhism proposes to begin perceiving the invisible, not to become a seer or someone enlightened in the supernatural, but to refine perception, to make yourself sensitive to the nuances of your mind. With practice, you begin to notice how a thought arises, how an emotion grows before exploding, how an intention is born before becoming action. All of this occurs at levels so subtle that without mindful attention they pass unnoticed. And there's also a dimension of interconnection with what's outside you, because the invisible isn't only in the mind, it's also in relationships, in what isn't said, in what's intuited, in how another person's emotional state can influence you even without a word being spoken. Buddhism teaches that everything is interrelated. Nothing exists by itself, neither you nor your thoughts. Each thing you experience is the result of a network of causes that extends beyond what you can imagine. Accepting this truth transforms your way of living. You no longer see problems as enemies, but as expressions of something deeper. You no longer react automatically because you know each impulse has a root, and you no longer feel alone because you perceive that you're part of a whole that's broader, more complex, and wiser than any plan you could devise. This chapter is an invitation to observe with different eyes, to open yourself to what isn't seen, to understand that what's most determining in your life isn't in the evident, but in the subtle, and that it's at those levels where you can truly begin to transform your reality. Karma and invisible causes, the secret fabric of our decisions. When we think of karma, we usually imagine a kind of cosmic justice. You do something good happens to you. You do something bad, punishment falls on you. But that's a very reduced vision. In reality, karma isn't a system of rewards and punishments. It's more like a pattern, a natural law that describes how actions generate consequences and how those consequences shape the course of our lives, even without us realizing it. Buddhism teaches that each action, each word, even each thought leaves a trace, not in some external mystical registry, but in your own mind, in your consciousness. That trace, that subtle energy, can remain dormant for years until certain conditions activate it. Then suddenly, you find yourself involved in a situation you don't fully understand, but that you yourself helped create. Imagine karma as a network of intertwined causes and effects, where each node represents an intention, a gesture, an emotion you once cultivated. That network is so vast it's impossible to understand in its totality, but its influence is felt all the time. That's why many times what happens to you doesn't have an immediate logical explanation. It's not chance, but invisible causes that have been acting from long before. One of the most powerful aspects of karma is that it originates from intention. It doesn't matter so much the visible result of what you do, but from what internal place you do it. You can help someone out of compassion or out of guilt. The action may seem the same, but the karma you're sowing is different. This is one of the reasons Buddhism places so much emphasis on cultivating a clear, stable, and loving mind, because from that clarity are born purer intentions, and with them a more harmonious life. Now, how does this interweave with the invisible plan? Well, if the invisible plan is the deep movement that pushes you towards spiritual evolution, karma is one of its engines. It's the mechanism that makes lessons arrive when they should arrive, that makes people appear who awaken something in you, whether love, fear, rejection, or learning, that makes opportunities arise just when you're prepared, even though you don't feel ready. All of that is karma operating in the depths. This doesn't mean everything is written or that you should resign yourself to what you have to live. On the contrary, karma isn't destiny, it's dynamic. You can change it. You can transform your future by modifying your present actions, and that begins again with intention. When you become conscious of what you're sowing, you begin to live with more attention, more care, more compassion. And in doing so, you also begin to weave a wiser, more coherent, invisible plan, more connected with your true nature. In daily practice, this translates to something very concrete: observing your decisions, asking yourself from where you do what. You do looking directly at your patterns, those impulses that repeat again and again, leading you to the same results. Because if karma has something in common with gravity, it's that it always acts, even if you don't see it. There are moments when life seems unfair, you make an effort, do things well, and still everything gets complicated. It's easy to fall into frustration. But when you understand that not everything you live is the fruit of what you did yesterday or last month, but of much older causes, you begin to have a new perspective, not to victimize yourself, but to recover your power, because although you can't change the past, you can stop feeding it. Buddhism teaches that karma is like a current. You can let yourself be dragged by it, or begin to swim in a different direction. That direction is called wisdom, and you don't need to know everything to start walking toward it. You only need to look with sincerity, recognize what's there, act from consciousness, and then, little by little, the invisible plan begins to reveal itself, not as something external, but as something you yourself are creating step by step in each instant. Emptiness and no mind, living without clinging. One of the most challenging but also most liberating concepts of Buddhism is that of emptiness. And no, it doesn't refer to a sad void or the absence of meaning. To speak of emptiness is to speak of freedom. Freedom from fixed ideas, from rigid identities, from beliefs that imprison us. It's a reminder that nothing exists by itself, that everything we are and everything we experience depends on multiple causes and conditions that are always changing. What we call I is actually a combination of body, mind, emotions, memories, thoughts, and habits. None of that remains. None of that is fixed. None of that is you. But since we live believing that set of things forms a solid identity, we suffer when something changes. We cling to the idea of who we are, and with that, we suffer when we don't fit into it. Emptiness invites us to let go, to stop looking for a permanent essence in what we feel, in what we think, in what we possess. And that doesn't mean disconnecting from the world. It means relating to the world from another place, from a softer, more fluid, less rigid understanding. When you understand that everything is impermanent, you stop fighting with change. When you see that nothing has independent existence, you stop feeling separated from others. This understanding is essential for connecting with the invisible plan, because as long as you remain clinging to a concrete idea of how things should be, you won't be able to perceive what's really happening. The invisible plan doesn't respond to your expectations. It responds to a deeper logic, to an intelligence that isn't rational but natural. And you can only get in touch with it when you empty yourself of what you think you know. Here enters the concept of no mind, not as the absence of thought, but as the capacity to be present without being trapped in thought, to observe without labeling, to experience without comparing, to live without being locked in the story the mind tells you all the time. Because the mind, if not trained, is like an incessant narrator that leaves no space for the new. It always interprets, always classifies, always repeats what it already knows. No mind is a space of openness. It's the fertile ground where intuition can arise, spontaneous understanding, deep connection with the present moment. And in that ground is where the invisible plan manifests with more clarity, not as a voice that tells you what to do, but as a silent internal certainty that you simply know. Like when you make a decision without doubting because something in you recognizes it, even though you can't explain it. Training emptiness and no mind isn't easy. It requires courage to look within, to let go of control, to stop looking for guarantees. But it's precisely there where true transformation begins. When you no longer need certainties and can rest in mystery. When you no longer identify with each emotion or thought and can inhabit them without fear. When you no longer cling to a version of yourself and can flow with life as it is. Living from emptiness isn't a spiritual theory. It's a daily practice. It's letting go of the need to be right. It's observing judgment without letting it dominate you. It's saying I don't know without feeling weak. And above all, it's trusting, because in the space that opens when you stop clinging, the invisible begins to speak. And when you learn to listen to it, you discover that you're not lost, nor alone, nor wrong. You're just on a path that reveals itself step by step when you no longer push it, force it, or control it. The role of Mara, the illusion that keeps us trapped. In Buddhist tradition, Mara represents the great obstacle, the lord of illusion, the one who prevents awakening. He's not an external demon as often misinterpreted. He's an internal force, a part of the mind that sabotages the transformation process, that sows doubts, that feeds fear, that whispers to you that you're not ready, that you can't, that you're not worth it. And although he seems like an enemy, Mara actually has an important role within the invisible plan. According to the story, when the Buddha was about to reach enlightenment, Mara appeared to tempt him, to distract him, to instill fear. He couldn't do it with violence or screams. He did it with subtleties, projecting desires, insecurities, attachments, everything that could return the Buddha to his old self. Because that's what Mara does. He keeps you in the known zone, in what you already are, in what you already know, in what's comfortable for you, even if it hurts. Mara didn't disappear with the Buddha's enlightenment. He remains alive in each of us and appears especially when you're about to take a leap. When something begins to truly change, he's that voice that breaks you just when you're freeing yourself, that convinces you to stay where you are, that makes you doubt your intuition, that compares you, blames you, anesthetizes you. But here's what's interesting. Buddhism doesn't teach fighting against Mara. It teaches recognizing him, saying, "I see you," not fighting but looking directly. Because what you don't see controls you, but what you can observe with clarity begins to lose force. Mara is part of the invisible plan because he fulfills a function. He shows you where you're still stuck, reveals your blind spots, your unhealed wounds, your hidden desires, your deepest identities. And if you know how to observe him, each appearance of Mara becomes a door, an opportunity to awaken, to stop reacting, to stop being dragged by the automatic. It's easy to hate that part of yourself that sabotages, but Buddhism proposes another, their approach, compassion, not because everything should be justified, but because that internal force was also formed by your history, by traumas, by conditioning, by the fear of suffering again. And if you treat it as an enemy, you're only fighting with yourself. That's why in many Buddhist tales, when Mara appears, the Buddha doesn't expel him. He invites him to sit, to have tea, recognizes him, accepts him, lets him be. And in doing so, he takes away his power, because Mara feeds on your resistance, on your internal struggle, on your rejection. But when you embrace him with consciousness, with presence, with gentleness, he dissolves. In daily life, Mara disguises himself. He can seem like a relationship you can't let go of, a routine you know no longer serves you but you maintain, a mental pattern that repeats even though it hurts you each time. Every time you feel there's something in you that prevents you from moving forward, it's likely Mara is near, not to destroy you but to show you something. And if you see it with clarity, that something becomes a path. In the invisible plan, Mara isn't the villain. He's the uncomfortable messenger who pushes you to look within, to mature, to awaken. And when you recognize him like this, you begin to change the way you see your own process, no longer as a fight between good and evil, but as a dance between the conscious and the unconscious, between what you know about yourself and what you haven't dared to see yet. And in the end, when you can invite Mara to sit with you, to have tea with your fears, your doubts, and your old ideas, you discover there's nothing more powerful than a mind that sees itself with clarity, because in that clarity, the invisible becomes light, and the path, however uncertain it may be, becomes livable. The invisible plan is a path of transformation. At this point in the journey, we're no longer talking about theories. We've seen how there are invisible forces that shape our life, how karma interweaves our decisions, how Mara appears to test our clarity, how detachment frees us from control, and how emptiness connects us with the true nature of everything we are. But now it's time to unite it all, to understand that this invisible plan isn't something foreign to you. It's your path, it's your life, it's your transformation in progress. The invisible plan isn't a script written by others. It's more like an open score where you are musician, composer, and listener at the same time. You don't control it, but you interpret it, and the more awake you are, the more sense what you play makes. Not because everything is easy or pleasant, but because you understand that each note, even the dissonant ones, has its place in the symphony. Transforming isn't changing what you are for something else. It's removing what you have in excess, what you're not. The layers of fear, ego, need for approval. Transformation doesn't happen because you achieve great things, but because you begin to see yourself with honesty, because you stop fleeing from yourself, because you dare to be with yourself in silence, in doubt, in waiting, because you stop doing to demonstrate and begin doing to live with meaning. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment isn't a distant destination, but a way of inhabiting the present. And the invisible plan is, in a way, that mysterious fabric that takes you without haste but without pause toward a more awakened version of yourself. It doesn't demand perfection from you. It only asks for presence, that you be there, that you observe, that you trust, that you let go of what hurts and embrace what transforms, even when you still don't understand what for. Many times the mind will tell you that you're not advancing, that there's no progress, that everything is chaos or repetition. But if you look carefully with an open heart, you'll realize that there is movement, that something deep is changing, that you no longer react the same way, that there are more pauses between impulse and response, that there's a seed of calm even though you're still surrounded by noise. That's the evidence of the invisible plan, an internal change that doesn't need to be shouted, that doesn't seek applause, that isn't measured with external achievements, but with the peace that begins to sprout within you, even in the midst of chaos. It's a silent compass that tells you when to continue, when to stop, when to wait, when to let go. And the most beautiful thing about all this is that you don't need to understand completely in order to walk. You only need to walk with consciousness. Each step, however small it may seem, is part of the path. And each conscious step you take illuminates a little more that invisible plan that has accompanied you from always, that doesn't judge you, that doesn't demand from you, that simply is there waiting for you. Now, if this journey we've taken together resonated with you, if you felt that something within you moved or became clear, I invite you to keep exploring, to keep making space for the invisible. And above all, don't do it alone. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing this type of reflection that doesn't just inform, but accompanies. Leave your comments. Tell me if any part of this video made sense to you, or if there's something you're going through and need to share, because sometimes putting it into words is already part of the process. And remember, even if you don't see it, even if you don't fully understand it, the invisible plan continues to act, and you are exactly where you need to be. In the end, the invisible plane is not a distant realm to escape to, but a subtle truth that we are constantly living within, whether we recognize it or not. It is the unseen current beneath our thoughts, choices, and emotions. It is karma, unfolding silently with every action we take. It is the emptiness that dissolves our rigid sense of self, and the non-mind that allows us to experience life without distortion, without grasping or pushing away. Even Mara, the personification of illusion, fear, and temptation, becomes less of a demon and more of a teacher, pointing directly at the places where we are still attached, still asleep. To perceive this invisible plane is to see with new eyes. We begin to understand that suffering doesn't come from the world itself, but from the way we relate to it. We stop running from discomfort and chasing fleeting pleasures. Instead, we rest in awareness, in presence, and find a quiet strength in simply being. This is the path of liberation, not by force, but by understanding. Thank you deeply for watching this far and exploring these profound ideas with me. May they inspire you to look beyond the surface of things and begin to sense the subtle truths guiding your journey. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and take care. With gratitude. Daily Dharma.